If they ran out into the night, they could be shot by the people who apparently wanted them gone. Charles looked at the other two helplessly. "We don't have much choice but to make a run for it. There's a fleet of cars about 100 yards outside the door. We could try to hotwire one, although I've never hotwired a car. Have either of you?" Jimmy and Lily shook their heads at the absurdity of the question. "Right. Well, then, we may just get lost in the dark." "Maybe they aren't after us," Lily interjected. "Maybe this is just a misunderstanding." She knew she was repeating herself, but it was the only thing that made sense inside her head. "Yeah, and when they see us, they will just take us aside, and we can ask to go to the American Embassy." Jimmy tried to sound like he was on board with Lily's conclusions. "Okay, then we run out, and if anything happens—" Charles weighed his words. "Anything life-threatening, we head to the parking lot, okay?" Charles waited for an answer from the bewildered duo, but they just stared at him like he was speaking in tongues. Charles turned the knob and quickly but quietly pulled the heavy metal door open. The crack was just enough for them to squeeze out into the night air while staying in a crouched position. Once they were out of the kitchen, Charles huddled in close to them. "We will have to make a run for it, but let's stay down for as long as we can." The two nodded as if hypnotized. Charles tried to muster a reassuring smile, but he knew he hadn't pulled it off as he watched the fear flicker brightly in Lily's eyes. Charles tucked himself into a ball and then rolled onto the ground so that he could scoot along on his body. Jimmy and Lily mimicked his technique. Lily realized that she would have laughed at Jimmy's lack of grace had he not been in a life-or-death situation. She made a note to herself to tease him about it later, if there would be a later. The three scooted on their bellies low to the ground and as fast as they could, and they headed toward an open field where Charles had remembered a barbed wire fence that surrounded Ada's entourage of cars. The star-filled sky loomed above, and although they could barely see, the darkness was a welcoming blanket after feeling so exposed. Jimmy could barely see Lily in front of him, but his heightened senses could hear her every move. He wanted to say something funny if he could only think of something funny, when a beam of light caught them and made further concealment impossible. A barrage of bullets whizzed by them. The trio hammered at a quicker pace as they dragged their bodies along the ground, despite their obvious exhaustion. Charles looked back and saw Lily's terrified face, and he could hear his heart pounding in his ears. He looked at the beam of light, realizing it was a car heading right at them. Afraid of being run over, he grabbed his daughter and stood up. He held tight to her and sprinted toward the fence, with Jimmy right behind them, screaming an array of obscenities. The car raced past them and spun around, as if out of control. It stopped sideways directly in their path and completely cutting them off from their mark. Charles was about to turn and run the other way when the back door of the car swung open. He heard a woman's voice. "Get in!" Charles knew that voice, and he knew he had no choice but to trust it. Still holding Lily tight, he yanked her toward the car as an array of bullets tore past their heads. Once near the door, Charles pulled Lily to safety. Jimmy stood paralyzed, and Charles realized he was in shock. He knew that Jimmy would be mortally wounded if he didn't make a break for the vehicle. Charles climbed over Lily despite her whimpering protests and ran back out into the line of fire. He leaped toward Jimmy, grabbed him by the shirt collar, and whirled him in a circle until he was facing the car. "Get in, now!" Charles' demanding voice snapped his assistant out of his hypnotic state. Jimmy's nose and mouth twitched as he sprang into the car and shut the door, leaving Charles outside alone. "Idiot!" screamed Adriana. Jimmy helplessly peered through the dark-colored glass as Charles crouched low to the ground and made his way to the passenger side of the car. Once there, Adriana opened the door and let him in. She couldn't help but smile, knowing he was now in her world, and that she was his only lifeline. A fact she would never let him forget.